Terminal C at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport hummed with the organized chaos of early morning departures. James Richardson moved through the security line with practiced efficiency, his carry-on bag already positioned for the scanner, his shoes ready to slip off, his boarding pass and ID in hand. He'd made this trip dozens of times, Dallas to Chicago, every other week for the past 2 years. As a Federal Air Marshal, flying was his job, but today, like most days, he was traveling undercover. Plain clothes, no badge visible, blending seamlessly with business travelers and tourists. The TSA agent at the document check barely glanced at him, waving him through to the security screening. James placed his bag on the conveyor belt, his jacket in a bin, and walked through the metal detector without incident. Then everything changed. "Sir, step aside, please." The TSA Supervisor, a man in his late 40s named Derek Paulson, according to his name badge, was gesturing to James. Random additional screening. James had been through this before. Sometimes it actually was random. Sometimes it wasn't. He complied without complaint, stepping to the designated area. "Arms out to the side," Paulson directed. James extended his arms. The pat-down began. Standard procedure, nothing unusual, until Paulson's hands lingered longer than necessary, his movements becoming more aggressive, more invasive. "Sir, I need you to loosen your stance," Paulson said loudly, drawing attention from other travelers. "My stance is fine," James replied calmly. "You're conducting a standard pat-down. Don't tell me how to do my job. Spread your legs wider." James complied, maintaining his composure even as he felt eyes turning toward them. Paulson's pat-down grew rougher, his hands checking the same areas multiple times. "What's in your pockets?" "Nothing." I emptied them into the bin. "I felt something." "Turn them out." James pulled his pockets inside out, showing they were empty. Paulson's jaw tightened. "He's clear," a female TSA agent said from nearby, having watched the entire interaction. "I'll determine when he's clear," Paulson snapped at her. He turned back to James. "Where are you flying today?" "Chicago." "Purpose of travel?" "Business." James kept his answer short, aware that anything more would be used against him. "What kind of business?" "I'd rather not discuss my employer's confidential matters in a public security line." Paulson's eyes narrowed. "You're being evasive. That's suspicious." "I'm being private. That's my right. Not when you're trying to board a plane." Paulson turned to his colleague. "I want his bag searched. Thoroughly." The female agent looked uncomfortable but complied, pulling James's carry-on from the conveyor belt. She opened it methodically, removing clothes, toiletries, a laptop. "Sir, we'll need to swab your electronics for explosive residue," she said apologetically. "That's fine," James said. He had nothing to hide. His weapon was secured according to Federal Air Marshal protocols, his credentials were in order, and he'd flown this exact route without incident dozens of times. But today, Paulson had decided he was a threat. The swab came back negative, as James knew it would. The laptop was clean. The bag contained nothing suspicious, standard business travel items. Paulson wasn't satisfied. "I want to question him further. Something's not right." "Derek," the female agent said quietly, "he's clean." "Let him go." "I said I'm not done." Paulson raised his voice again, ensuring nearby travelers could hear. "Sir, you're going to need to come with me for additional questioning." "On what grounds?" James asked, his patience wearing thin. "I have reasonable suspicion that you may pose a security risk." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on my professional judgment." James took a slow breath. He could end this right now, flash his credentials, reveal his identity as a Federal Air Marshal, but that would compromise his cover for every future flight. Air marshals were most effective when no one knew who they were. Still, this was escalating beyond acceptable bounds. "Your professional judgment that somehow determined I'm suspicious after a negative pat-down, a clean bag search, and negative explosive residue tests?" James asked. "Your attitude is suspicious. Your evasiveness is suspicious. Your—" Paulson stopped himself, but the pause said everything. "My what?" James pressed. "Finish that sentence." Paulson's face flushed. Your whole demeanor. You're fitting a profile. What profile? The female agent stepped in. Derek, that's enough. Sir, you're free to go. I apologize for the delay. He's not going anywhere, Paulson insisted. I'm calling for law enforcement backup. Now other TSA agents were gathering, sensing a situation spiraling out of control. Travelers in line were recording on their phones. An airport police officer approached, assessing the scene. What's the problem here? The officer asked. This individual is refusing to cooperate with security protocols, Paulson said quickly. That's not accurate, James said, his voice still calm despite his rising anger. I've complied with every request. I passed every screening. This agent has decided to detain me without cause. The police officer looked between them. Has he set off any alarms? No, but failed any tests? No, but his behavior. The officer turned to James. Sir, have you been cooperative? Completely. The female TSA agent spoke up. He has been cooperative. He passed all screenings. There's no reason to detain him. Paulson rounded on her. I'm your supervisor. I decide when someone is cleared. You're abusing your authority, she said quietly but firmly. And you're profiling. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Paulson's face went from red to purple. I am not profiling. I'm following security protocols. You let 3 people go through after him who were far more evasive in questioning, she continued. You didn't subject any of them to this level of scrutiny. James watched the interaction with grim satisfaction. At least one TSA agent understood what was happening. The police officer seemed to come to a decision. Sir, he addressed James, do you have identification beyond your boarding pass? James pulled out his driver's license. The officer examined it, then handed it back. And your purpose of travel? This was the moment. James could continue playing civilian, potentially miss his flight, and let this petty tyrant win. Or he could end it. He made his decision. Officer, I need to speak with you privately. TSA Supervisor as well. The officer's eyebrows raised slightly, catching something in James's tone. All right, let's step over here. They moved away from the main security line. James reached into his wallet and pulled out a credential that Paulson couldn't see from his angle. I'm Federal Air Marshal James Richardson, he said quietly, showing his badge and ID to the police officer. I'm scheduled on the 9:15 flight to Chicago. This is an undercover assignment. The officer's eyes widened. He looked at the credentials carefully, then nodded. My apologies, Marshal. This should have never happened. What should have never happened? Paulson demanded, trying to see what James had shown the officer. James turned to face him fully. This. He held up his badge and credentials where Paulson could see them clearly. Federal Air Marshal. I'm law enforcement, just like you claim to be, except I actually follow protocols instead of profiling passengers. The color drained from Paulson's face. Around them, the other TSA agents had stopped pretending not to watch. The woman who'd defended James allowed herself a small smile. You're an air marshal? Paulson stammered. I am. And I've just watched you violate every anti-profiling policy the TSA has. You subjected me to enhanced screening without cause. You detained me without reasonable suspicion. You ignored negative test results and continued harassment based purely on, what did you call it? Your professional judgment? Paulson tried to recover. I was just doing my job. Random additional screening is within protocol. It wasn't random. James cut him off. You selected me specifically. And we both know why. The police officer stepped in. Marshal Richardson, would you like to file a formal complaint? James considered. He could let this go, chalk it up to another instance of flying while black, and move on with his day. But how many other travelers had Paulson harassed? How many had missed flights, felt humiliated, been made to feel like criminals for no reason other than their appearance? Yes, James said. I would like to file a formal complaint. Against Supervisor Derek Paulson for racial profiling, abuse of authority, and creating an unsafe security environment by wasting resources on harassment instead of actual threats. Paulson's face went through several emotions: shock, anger, fear. "That's not fair." "I didn't know you were an air marshal." "That's exactly the point," James interrupted. "You didn't know who I was. You saw a black man in business casual clothes and decided I was suspicious. If I'd been white with the same answers, same bag, same demeanor, would you have detained me?" Paulson couldn't answer. James considered. He could let this go, chalk it up to another instance of flying while black, and move on with his day. But how many other travelers had Paulson harassed? How many had missed flights, felt humiliated, been made to feel like criminals for no reason other than their appearance? "Yes," James said. "I would like to file a formal complaint against Supervisor Derek Paulson for racial profiling, abuse of authority, and creating an unsafe security environment by wasting resources on harassment instead of actual threats." Paulson's face went through several emotions: shock, anger, fear. "That's not fair. I didn't know you were an air marshal." "That's exactly the point," James interrupted. "You didn't know who I was. You saw a black man in business casual clothes and decided I was suspicious. If I'd been white with the same answers, same bag, same demeanor, would you have detained me?" Paulson couldn't answer. "I fly this route twice a month," James continued. "I've watched you work this checkpoint before. I've watched you wave through white passengers who set off alarms, who had suspicious items, who gave evasive answers. But somehow, I pass every test and still get detained." The female TSA agent spoke up again. "I've noticed this pattern too. I've tried to report it through proper channels." "That's enough, Linda," Paulson snapped. "No, it's not enough," Linda shot back. "I'm tired of watching you profile passengers. I'm tired of being told to ignore it. This man is a federal agent, but even if he wasn't, he deserved better treatment." The police officer was taking notes. "Ma'am, I'll need your statement as well. This is going to require a full investigation." Within minutes, more airport police arrived along with a TSA administrator. James found himself in an office, recounting the entire encounter while his flight time ticked closer. The administrator, a woman named Patricia Chen, listened with increasing dismay. "Marshal Richardson, on behalf of the TSA, I apologize. This should never have happened. With respect, ma'am, it happens constantly. This is just the first time it happened to someone with federal credentials and the authority to push back." Patricia nodded slowly. "You're right, and that's unacceptable." She pulled up something on her computer. "I'm looking at Supervisor Paulson's record. This isn't his first complaint. It's his 7th. 7? James leaned forward. "And he still works here?" "The complaints were difficult to substantiate, passengers who'd already left, lack of witnesses willing to testify. But your complaint, combined with Agent Linda Martinez's willingness to provide a statement, gives us what we need to take action." "What kind of action?" "Immediate suspension pending investigation, possible termination depending on findings, and a full review of our security protocols to ensure this pattern stops." James felt some satisfaction, but it was hollow. How many people did he harass before someone with my credentials came through? How many missed flights? How many felt violated, humiliated, discriminated against? Patricia had no good answer. Too many. "And I take responsibility for not catching this sooner. We failed them and failed you." A knock on the door interrupted them. Linda Martinez stood there. "Marshal Richardson, your flight board's in 20 minutes. I've arranged for you to be escorted directly to the gate." James stood. "Thank you, Agent Martinez. Your willingness to speak up means something." She nodded. "It was the right thing to do. I just wish I'd done it sooner." As James gathered his things, Patricia stopped him. "Marshal, I know you travel this route frequently. When you return, I'd like you to meet with our training staff. Help us understand what red flags to look for, how to prevent this from happening again." "I'll think about it," James said. He made his flight with minutes to spare. As he settled into his assigned seat, He felt the familiar weight of responsibility that came with his job, not just protecting passengers from threats, but apparently protecting them from security theater gone wrong. The flight attendant recognized him with a subtle nod. She'd been briefed on his presence, as all crew were, but to other passengers he was just another businessman heading to Chicago. If only Paulson had understood that concept. The best security was invisible, professional, efficient, not theatrical, discriminatory, and focused on the wrong threats. 2 weeks later, James returned through DFW. He half expected to see Paulson, but a different supervisor was manning the checkpoint. The process was smooth, professional, quick. Linda Martinez spotted him. "Marshal Richardson, glad to see you back. How did the investigation turn out?" Paulson was terminated. 7 complaints became 12 once people heard someone had finally been held accountable. Turns out he'd been systematically targeting travelers of color for years. James nodded grimly. "Better late than never, I suppose." "There's more. The TSA is implementing new training based partly on your complaint. Anti-profiling protocols, accountability measures, easier reporting systems." "That's good. Will it stick?" Linda smiled sadly. "That depends on whether people like us keep speaking up. Keep holding the line." "The line shouldn't need holding," James said, "but I'm glad there are people like you willing to do it." 3 months after the incident, James was invited to speak at a TSA training conference. He stood before a room of security personnel, airport police, and administrators. "I'm not here to villainize TSA agents," he began. "Your job is difficult, thankless, and crucial. You're the first line of defense for air travel security." He paused, letting that sink in. "But effective security isn't about power trips or proving authority. It's not about profiling travelers based on skin color, religious clothing, or accent. It's about identifying actual threats through behavior, evidence, and professional judgment. Emphasis on professional." He shared his experience, carefully walking through each step where Paulson had gone wrong. "When you subjected me to enhanced screening without cause, you weren't making anyone safer. You were wasting time that could have been spent on actual threats. You were teaching other travelers that TSA is arbitrary and discriminatory. You were making your own job harder." Someone in the back raised a hand. "But isn't it true that certain demographics are statistically more likely—" "Stop right there," James interrupted. "Terrorism has no single demographic. Threats come from all races, religions, nationalities. The moment you start profiling based on appearance, you're not doing security. You're doing discrimination. And you're missing actual threats because you're focused on the wrong thing." He pulled up slides showing terrorist plots disrupted by alert security, plots that would have succeeded if agents had been focused on profiling rather than behavior. This is what good security looks like. Alert, aware, professional. It doesn't involve humiliating passengers who pass every test. It doesn't involve power trips or proving who's in charge. It involves keeping people safe. The training session lasted 3 hours. Afterward, dozens of agents approached him with questions, concerns, stories of their own struggles with discriminatory colleagues. One young black TSA agent pulled him aside. "Thank you for speaking up. I've dealt with assumptions from travelers who don't expect security personnel to look like me. It's exhausting, constantly proving myself." James placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know, but the fact that you're here, doing this job, opening doors for others, that matters. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong." 6 months after the incident, James received an email from Patricia Chen. "Marshal Richardson," it read, "I wanted to update you on the changes implemented following your complaint. TSA has launched a national initiative on anti-profiling. Derek Paulson's case became a teaching example in training. And most importantly, passenger complaints about discriminatory screening have dropped 40% at DFW alone." She continued, "This wouldn't have happened without your willingness to speak up, to file the complaint, to invest time in making the system better. Thank you for not just accepting what happened and moving on." James read the email twice. 40% reduction in complaints. That meant real people, real travelers, real families not experiencing what he'd experienced. That meant something. He replied simply, "Thank you for taking it seriously. That's all any of us want, to be taken seriously when we report injustice." On his next flight through DFW, James noticed the changes. New posters about passenger rights, clearer complaint procedures, TSA agents who seemed more aware, more careful, more professional. It wasn't perfect. Racism and profiling didn't disappear because of one training or one policy change. But it was better. Measurably, documentably better. As James passed through security, smoothly, professionally, without incident, he thought about all the times he'd stayed silent. All the times he'd let smaller indignities slide because making a fuss seemed more trouble than it was worth. This time, making a fuss had mattered. Speaking up had created real change. The gate agent scanned his boarding pass. "Have a good flight, sir." "Thank you," James said, meaning it. As he settled into his seat, he pulled out his phone and texted his wife. "Made it through security without incident. Progress." Her response came immediately. "Proud of you." For all of it. James smiled. The work wasn't done, might never be done. But battles like this, small victories that created ripples of change, they added up. One confrontation, one complaint. One person willing to stand up and say, "This isn't acceptable." That's how systems changed. Not through grand gestures or sweeping reforms, but through individuals refusing to accept injustice even when it would be easier to stay quiet. If this story resonated with you, remember, airport security should make us safer, not subject us to discrimination. If you witness profiling, report it. If you experience it, document it. Change happens when enough people refuse to accept injustice as normal. Share this with someone who travels frequently. Remind them of their rights. Encourage them to speak up when those rights are violated. Subscribe to Real Justice Stories for more tales of accountability, systemic change, and the courage it takes to challenge authority when authority is wrong. Thank you for watching. Remember, security should be based on behavior and evidence, not appearance and assumptions. The person you're profiling today might be the federal agent who ends your career tomorrow. Treat everyone with professional respect. It's not just right, it's smart.